Hidden among the dunes, you are overcome with awe by this ancient monument. The stonework is from a day gone by, and its unlikely presence in the middle of the barren desert seems to raise more questions than answers. But it is here your weathered map said you will find the relic stones you seek. The temple lays before you. Enter if you dare. Hey guys, welcome to the channel. My name's Damien. I'm a noble barn bard here today to show you how to make an Egyptian style pyramid and desert scatter terrain for your next sandbox adventure. Come check it out. So I was a huge fan of heavy metal and D&D back in the early 80s, and I still am, but there are two main sources of inspiration for me from that era that influenced my Egyptian style project that I'm sharing with you today. One is the iconic album by Iron Maiden released in 1984 called Power Slave, and the other is the advanced Dungeons & Dragons campaign module called Desert of Desolation by Tracy and Laura Hickman, I think released in 1982. More recently, I've found renewed inspiration for this theme in Assassin's Creed Origins, which is an action-adventure game set in an open-world environment in Hellenistic Egypt. And if you haven't played this game, it's freaking awesome. Really beautiful. It's a heck of a lot of fun to explore. You can climb and slide down pyramids, plunder tombs, go hunting with a falcon, you can assassinate pharaohs, and on and on and on. I really enjoyed the spatial mechanics of the game and wanted to replicate that as best as possible on my D&D table. Specifically, I wanted hieroglyphic columns of varying height that could be climbed and jumped off of, ruined walls that could be hidden behind, an altar of an ancient temple with a secret entrance, and of course, large imposing Egyptian-style pyramid full of danger and hidden treasure. And I think I was able to achieve my visionary goal with this piece, and it was a huge hit at the table. So if this is something you might be interested in building, stick around and I'll share with you the secrets I've learned from Imhotep himself. To get started, you're going to need 8 pieces of the classic Readi-board 20 by 30 by 3/16 of an inch white foam, made famous by craft father Scotty, as well as about a 2 foot by 2 foot section of XPS pink insulation foam. Foamular is what I have here locally. You're also going to want a generous amount of Mod Podge, preferably matte finish, as well as some regular PVA or white glue, also in large amounts. You can add to your list 2 36-inch lengths of 1/2 inch Balsa triangular bevels, typically found in hobby stores, as well as some woodland scenic foam putty and a latex or silicone white caulk for filling gaps. I recommend whatever paint you can find cheap. Americana is a decent product. And I also recommend using cheap brushes for this and any terrain piece, as well as these 2-inch chip brushes here, throwaway brushes for this project because there's plenty of surface area to cover. For cutting foam, I use both a Proxon wire cutter and a box knife. While the Proxon is not required, it certainly speeds things up if you can fit it into your budget. And of course, you're going to want a glue gun, which is a crafting requisite. If you can fit it into your budget as well, these mini box clamps are great for holding things together, and it's always nice to have a long straight edge available for making nice even cuts. To build this pyramid, I removed the black paper from 4 of my Readi-board pieces and cut out 4 isosceles triangles that were then used for the sides of the pyramid. The dimensions I went with were 28-inch base, 20-inch height, which gave me about 14.5 inches of overall stature when completed. The next step was to use a ballpoint pen and a ruler to draw out the pyramid's brickwork. I went with 3/4 inch by 1/2 inch bricks, which wasn't terribly tedious, but still pretty detailed at this scale. After the bricks were drawn, I took these triangles and glued them directly onto another piece of Readi-board using PVA glue. Note I'm gluing directly onto the black paper as it lends greater strength to the overall sculpture. Then after a day or so of drying, I cut off the extra pieces but kept them for a third layer of siding, which represents kind of deteriorated limestone you often see, those classic pyramid images. Now how you go about this next step's up to you and how much character you want to bring to the piece, but this third layer is meant to look like ancient siding that's sloughed off given the ravages of time. So I kind of went with what I thought looked cool based on the Great Pyramids of Giza. That's kind of what I was after. So I went with siding that was still intact on the top but missing on the bottom. Main thing with this step is that you keep your edges lined up. So I labeled my 4 sides A, B, C, and D, and just made sure that I kept the right side of A lining up with the left side of B, and so on. Once you've sorted this out, go ahead and glue this third layer onto your triangle pieces, wherever your siding's supposed to be. And after that, go ahead and add some detail work. What I did was I ordered these cool little skull buttons from eBay, not shying away from desert campaign tropes, and then I texturized with aluminum foil and a piece of concrete I found outside on the road. I like this little piece of concrete because it gives me just a little bit more variation. But once you're happy with your line work and texturing, cut your balsa pieces into half, giving you 4 struts of 18 inches in length. Now these are going to be used to support the overall structure. So here I'm using PVA glue and my mini box clamps to create those struts, or to create the edges that you'll glue onto to make the pyramid. You can use a glue gun if you don't have the clamps, but whatever you do, just make sure that that edge is nice and solid and flush. But once you're certain you have nice rigid sides to work with, you can start using a glue gun to actually construct the pyramid form. And if your measurements are correct, everything should line up quite nicely. Just make sure that your 2 pieces with the balsa struts are opposite each other. A is opposite C or B is opposite D. Go ahead and start gluing your sides together, being careful to match your edges, and by the time you get to that last line, your pyramid should have taken shape. Filling the edges on the cracks is a 2-part process where I started with a silicone acrylic caulk to take up most of the volume. Here, this is an Easy Caulk product from DAP, which is really cool because it's kind of like Cheese Whiz. It just squirts on out. You don't need a gun, and it's acrylic, so it cleans up fairly easily with water and a sponge. After the caulk had dried, I came back and I followed up with some foam putty because the foam putty acts like foam when it's dry, and I wanted to be able to add some line work to the edges prior to painting, so it's kind of an important follow-up step to filling your cracks. I finished off the build by gluing my little fancy skull buttons into the sockets I drilled a little bit earlier. And the next step is kind of optional, but I thought it'd be cool to have some giant scorpions running around the pyramid. And after finding these rubber scorpions on Amazon, I decided to put push pins into the belly of these beasts so I could actually stick them into the pyramid like a Mr. Potato Head. And then have them kind of chase away players who are brave enough to climb this cursed monument. Now you might scoff at the idea of poking a pin into your hard-earned, tediously crafted terrain piece, but the damage is quite minimal, and I think it's worth it. So just a little bit of finished detail, and once you got your edges all done, it's time to black bomb. Black bombing being a 50-50 mix of black paint and Mod Podge used to seal the piece and basically provide a base coat of paint. I then build up layers of dry brush, starting with a chocolate brown. I'm using my 2-inch brushes here, and I then move to a cocoa brown, kind of just lightening up the colors as I go, finally ending up with a bleached sand. It should be noted that I used quite a bit more paint than I expected to dry brush this way, and in retrospect, I think using spray paint from a can in whatever color scheme you choose would probably save a bit of time. Then to wrap it all up, I used a minimal amount of rust, dark blue, and aqua washes to decorate the siding and all the custom pieces I had put on there. So the finished results were pretty close to what I was aiming for. I really like how the color scheme came out, and of course the scorpions for me put it over the edge. One advantage to building a pyramid this way is that it's hollow inside and can be set on top of terrain pieces that hypothetically exist inside the pyramid, so when the PCs make it inside, you can pull it off and there'll be a big reveal at the table. So more to come on that idea. But for now, I have a pyramid and some desert-style scatter terrain, which is the focus of the next section of this video. For my desert-style scatter terrain, I started with modular walls using a method demonstrated by Jeremy on Blackmagic Craft, episode 92, with the main differences in my technique being basically the paint scheme I used, how I made my bricks, as well as the basing, which is made from foam instead of cardboard and decorated with sand. There are numerous videos out there for making bricks, some of which are quite clever. The system I use is really just an amalgamation of a few different styles. I first cut 1/2 inch square strips of XPS foam, and then I marked every 3/4 of an inch along their length with a pin to match the dimensions of the pyramid bricks. And then I took a large flat file and carefully pulled it along the edges so it gently buggered up the sharp corners, being very careful not to rip the strips in half. Then using aluminum foil, I texturized all the sides of the strips, and with an X-Acto blade cut about 3/4 of a way through each strip on each line. When doing this, you don't want to cut all the way through because you're going to break these off one at a time, giving each brick kind of a unique aged look. But once you have your bricks, it's merely a matter of fixing them with your glue gun into the shapes you desire. Moving on, I wanted to have a set of diverse pharaonic columns that would be used in the game for climbing and other shenanigans. And since I didn't have a circle jig, I used a large 3/4 inch flat washer as a template for cutting my rounds. By fixing the washer onto the foam with my glue gun, I could then use the Proxon to cut a perfect circle. Fortunately, the washer would pop right off the dense foam, and they're pretty easy to work with in this manner. I should also note that these circles were 1 inch thick to begin with, and I decided to slice them in half to a 1/2 inch thickness to better resemble actual stonework. After this was done, I had my coins. I incised 8 equidistant lines, about 1/4 inch deep on each one, and then stacked them with my glue gun, alternating the lines so it looked like columnar bricks. I then made several panes of foam, pink foam that had been sliced to about 1/16 of an inch, or about the thickness of deli-cut ham, and proceeded to draw Egyptian-style hieroglyphs. The idea was to make an orderly drawing of these hieroglyphs and then make irregular cuts through the panes to make it kind of look like sections of old plaster that were falling off the columns. Now, I only made a few panes of about 4 by 6 inches because I only really needed partial covering with this technique. But once these were cut out, it was just kind of a matter of starting at the bottom with the base edge and just eyeballing where these sections should go. The next step was to fix the capitals or tops of the columns, and out of the 10 columns that I made, only 3 were full height. So I went with 3 Tropicana juice lids for this feature. I've seen juice lids used for a variety of things like fountains and altars. They work quite well for a variety of purposes. And after the column was done, I texturized it using my trusty piece of concrete. I didn't show this here, but I also roughed up the Tropicana lids a fair bit with sandpaper and a knife to make them look old, as well as to hold paint a little bit better, to give them a tooth, as it were. Next on the list was the obligatory pylon that serves as an entry gate to any Egyptian-style ruin. The building in this pylon usually are used essentially the same technique as the ruined wall scatter, but included using a section of pink foam as sort of the meat of the piece that was cut to the desired shape. Then, using the scraps of Readi-board foam I had lying around, I just added layers on top of this armature to kind of provide depth or detail, more variation to the overall gate. I even used individual bricks on the side and put a nice capstone on the top, which I reluctantly kind of gouged a huge crack into in order to emphasize kind of an ancient looking part to it. Worthy of note is that the dry brush color scheme here is slightly different from what I used on the pyramid. Then I moved from a black bomb to a dark red to cocoa and then to bleached sand. I discovered through kind of palette experimentation that the red as a second coat kind of really sells that sandstone look. Unfortunately, I have even less video of the temple and altar itself, but it's essentially the same idea, using loose bricks and pinned lines on top of XPS or Readi-board foam to create a convincing architecture. I'm a huge fan of the Golgari Guild and Magic the Gathering, so I paid an homage with this piece by drawing that into the temple floor And I even added a secret entrance to the pyramid that lies underneath the altar. You can see the steps in this frame. And by making the altar separate from the temple ruins and then using magnets in its corners to kind of lock it into place, it's a fun little gimmick at the table. And I rounded it off with some simple doors, utilizing the skulls that I had bought earlier to kind of tie the theme together. And then I finally, last step, 3D printed an Egyptian chess set I found on the internet. I wanted to have an assortment of thematically correct statues, and this fit well, but I was really rushed at this point, and I didn't get to sand out the lines for better or for worse. Still kind of look cool, but it is what it is. Well, that's all I have for you today, an Egyptian-style pyramid and modular desert scattered terrain. Hopefully you found something useful in this video for your own crafting game, a pyramid perhaps to add to your sandbox adventure, classic gaming trope that every table needs. Otherwise, thanks for dropping by the old Barn Barge channel, and we hope to see you soon here on the internet. Aloha.